what does that mean to you and everything?
So I've always been a rabble-rouser, and I've always been a storyteller, and I think theater education was not what I thought I would do, like Commissioner Howerton was saying. And by the way, thank you, ma'am, for your work in the city over the last 15, 20 years. It is not an easy city, but it is certainly a city that rewards you if you serve it. So thank you.
Thank you.
As a citizen of Durham, thank you. But theater education was not in my path, right? Like where you end up is never where you think you're going. And I think that that's one of the things when I teach my high school students, they get all bound up at 15 about making the decision that will affect the course of their life adversely or, to the positive. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're going to end up where you're going to end up. It all shakes out. So relax. Just take the next step. I wanted to be a priest, right? I wanted to be a priest. They asked me at 7 years old. I was raised Catholic. Sister Ann asked me what I wanted to be before our first communion, and I said I want to be a priest. And she says, "No, dear, I think you mean a nun." And I said, "No, the nuns have ugly costumes." And so she sent me crying to Father Charles, and at the time, the only thing that I could do on the altar was be a lector. I couldn't even be an altar boy. This is 76, 77? And so they built a little stand for me, and because I couldn't reach the book, I had to memorize it. So I had an acting gig every week from 7 to 19. So a lot of singers get their start in church. I got my acting start in church because I was reading on the altar. I mean, I played Jesus in the Passion from the time I was 11 to the time I was 23.
Now, you can get me into all kinds of trouble. You can get me to all kinds of trouble, Hope, and I'm probably going to go there because, a lot of people, when they go to church, they probably are thinking to themselves that some of the people on the church pulpit are some of the best actors of all time because some of them are giving great messages, but we don't necessarily know that they're living the message that they're preaching. So
but I mean, I
some
didn't
people
do it for that. But that when you say what you got into, for me, and my husband called me out on this a couple of years ago. He says, "Well, you realize you're still a priest, right? You're just preaching the gospel of stories can change people's hearts. It's the same thing. It's just a different story." And I was like, oh, yeah, kind of. Because I think one of the things that drew me to a Judeo-Christian background and draws me to education is, at least in America, the theology is that every democratic citizen needs to be armed with a full and free education to be able to handle the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen. And it's really the last time we put everybody together and we go, you got to figure it out. You don't get to say these people don't come. You don't get to say we don't, you don't get to gate yourself away from the citizenry. This is the next generation of citizenry. Figure it out. And I think it's a super important thing, and it's how I run my theater program, is that story is a way that we talk about our problems, we talk about our aspirations, and then have a collective conversation as a community, right? And with high school theater, with young people, you're talking about the respect, for young people to say, we're struggling with these things, we think this way about the world, and they're not saying that in isolation. I think one of the things that's difficult about social media and the conversations that young people are having on social media, even in activism, even in social change, is that they're in an echo chamber, right? Theater, you got an audience, and that audience will give you back. One of the most powerful experiences a kid talked about in doing theater with me, we were doing the Laramie Project, and we kept the lights on in the house. We did not turn the house lights down, which you don't think is a big deal, but it was very unsettling for the audience. They're like, wait a second, we're supposed to be disappeared. And they were all their reactions, all their responses were broadcast back, and they could see who was crying. They could see who was sucking their teeth. And one of my performers said, being able to see, my mom, her face soften at parts of the play that I didn't think she would soften, made me brave about telling her certain things about me that I had not been brave about. Like I got informed about my mom in a way that I was not informed before. And I think that feedback loop and opening yourself to that feedback loop in a citizenry is really important. And I think that it's atrophying quickly. And so I used to think that it was important to have my kids learn their own voice. And I actually think now I'm turning my eye to talking them, thinking about how to use those skills to speak together with respect, speak to each other with respect.
Because how do you think we're doing in terms of like teaching the importance of art and theater? That's one of the things that we've talked about with other guests on this show, is that sometimes it feels like it's being lost in the mix, because I know a lot of art programs have been cut by a variety of things, but definitely on the state and the federal level. And then that raises the question, are our kids learning enough about critical thinking? Because to me, that is a very vital part of developing your critical thinking ability.
Oh, this is such a complex question. So if you had, I'm a Marva Collins girl, okay? Give me three, you know who Marva Collins was? Marva Collins was a woman who didn't think Chicago city schools were servicing her child and other children well. And so she took like 5 of them that nobody would want, put them in a back storage room in her apartment and like taught them. If you have a 5-to-1 student ratio, there is a student-teacher ratio, there is nothing you can't do. But we don't have that ratio in our schools. So just like Commissioner Howerton said, you do with what you are allotted, right? The same as the county commissioners are like, the state's only giving us this much money, so we got to do with what we got. So you get schools in a position of, we got to do with what we got, right? And we also have the line that we are starting, because of the economic gap, we are starting to have more and more people earlier on in their trajectory of education worried about the investment of their time for financial gain later. So it used to be that the high school education was about really building a citizen, and now it's about building the building blocks for your financial security. And so I don't know how, and the arts are not funded, right? Like, even at the highest level, there are many theaters in this area where it would be more prestigious for me as an artist to work, and it would cut my salary in half. So when somebody jokingly says to me, oh, we'd love to have you here at blah, 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 but we can't afford you, they're not kidding. And it's why you have a continuation of people of affluence and of a strain of race and a strain of gender running arts organizations, because they're the only people who can last through the 10 years of $15,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year jobs with no health benefits, with no retirement benefits, because they have other means. They either are, they can survive it. And so it's very hard for me to tell an immigrant child who they are going to be the breadwinner for their family, because their family sacrificed everything to get them here, to go study at an MFA at Juilliard, even if they're good enough, knowing that there's a whole Broadway, off-Broadway movement about people going bankrupt working on Broadway. So which one do you want to change, right? Like, I would love it that we don't have to start worrying about the commodification of education until you're 18. That would be a good solution, right? So it's hard when you talk about economics, but do I think that the mindset of art should be infused in everything? Absolutely. Does that mean that you need more staff members per child? Because I don't know what I'm going in to teach. I'm unlocking each of my students as an individual puzzle. I can't bubble that. And bubble testing them is cheaper. Let's not talk about how it's standardized. It's just cheaper to score. Because you can standardize critical thinking testing. It's what they do with AP. But it costs a whole bunch of money. So that's that's how I answer that question. I'm sorry if that was far too complex an answer rather than, yes, the art should be supported. Everybody should take an art. Yes. Yes.
No, that was actually what I was looking for.
But not everybody has the luxury. I would like our system to give everybody the luxury. No, I think the way to solve that is put in – go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because I know that even on Facebook, and I think it's definitely a Durham group, or maybe even a Triangle group, but I would argue it's probably even a national group called Art Ain't Innocent, and that's part of what their whole conversation has been, is this conversation about the fact that these are artists of all kinds of varieties, everything from film, from theater to literary to artists that are doing more visual arts and photography and things of that nature. I know my dad is part of that group, but that's part of the conversations they've been having, is that they're tired of the people that you were just talking about, the administrators that can afford, that are making like X amount of money, or that are getting crazy amount of money from either the county or the state or whatever, but then they're turning around and not paying the artists what they feel are at least survivable wages. So they sometimes feel that the
what's the first money that gets cut in the schools?
Right. I mean, the state, right? The state did a great thing because it looks great. They made in elementary schools, they made a 1 to 22, 1 to 24. They mandated that. But then if you're going to mandate that, you need to up the budget for teacher allotment. Because when you don't do those things in conjunction, you get very generous counties like Durham, like Wake, like Orange County, who have the resources. They fill in the gap, right? Yep. Brenda Howerton does her job for our Durham children. And those kids still have a music teacher in elementary school. But in Warren County, that's not happening. And that's not on the county commissioners. That's not on the principals in those schools. That is on the state legislature that talks out of one side of their mouth with their philosophy and the other side of their mouth with their pocket. So there you are.
Go ahead. Preach, sister. Preach.
Well, I told you.
So, Brenda, just out of curiosity, then I'll get back to some more questions for Hope as well. Did you ever think, when you were a kid, you said what you didn't think you were going to be in politics and everything. Did you ever have any aspirations of doing anything in the arts? Or what was the job that you thought you were going to do when you were a kid?
I was going to be a teacher. That's what I always thought I was going to be. It was a teacher.
But see, I think that being a county commissioner is the same thing.
Yeah, I guess I do it in a different way. I'm not in the classroom, so I coach.
And coaching is a form of teaching.
Yes, it is. And also, I'm always working. Wherever I can work with young people in school, I'm always talking to them about what does county government do? What does it mean for them? How does it impact your dads and your moms? Yep. And when I start talking about the taxes, when I start talking about the food, that the environmental health, have to inspect restaurants so that when you go into that restaurant, if you don't see a 97 point something, tell your parents to go, you don't want to eat there. Sometimes the parents call me and say, my kid don't want to eat anywhere I take them. They said the numbers are not high enough. The commissioner said that the numbers are not high enough, so the food is not right.
But that's you educating the kids, and their parents are getting educated at the same time. So a lot of times we need that kind of education.
I mean, that's what you want to be as a teacher, is you want to be